Which profession hires the dumbest people? Story 1. I run a small production company, so I need actors frequently. Let me tell you, these are the least intelligent people in the entire world. But the golden ticket is that they're not just less intelligent. They're pretentiously less intelligent. Less intelligent, but trying really hard to make their brand of less intelligence seem deep and insightful. I had one actor, while filming a commercial for a yogurt, ask me, "But would my character really look at the yogurt right now?" I feel like they'd wait another couple of seconds before looking down. This character had no name. Literally, the only thing they did was look at the yogurt. The actor was trying to impress me with her try-hard approach. Spoiler, it doesn't work. One time I was filming a PDF software commercial, and I told the actor that I'd be filming in a high frame rate so that I could slow it down. He didn't really get it, so I just said, "It's a slow-motion shot. You don't need to worry about it, so just go at regular speed." I had to explain this repeatedly over 5 takes, that the camera was making it slow motion and that he didn't have to. I had to explicitly tell him twice not to do it in slow motion. The guy made slow-mo FX noises in slow motion as he moved his hands across the keys on more than one occasion. At one point, when I told him to do it at regular speed, he responded, "Okay," paused, and then said, oh, okay, before promptly going back to slow motion. If I hadn't been with him for like 4 hours, I'd have sworn he was high. That guy was the worst. Like, honestly, his sandwich was missing some mustard, but almost all of them do this thing where you're giving them direction, and they'll nod and say yes at the exact moments that they need to be taking in information. "Okay, so when you pick up the cup, I need you to..." "Yeah, okay. Make sure that you're not looking into the..." "Gotcha." The most frustrating thing in the world. God, I hate actors. Story 2. There was a group I was in, years ago, with this guy named Mike in it. Mike was a very nice guy, not a mean bone in his body. Married with 3 kids, but unemployed, so his wife worked. He could never get a job anywhere because he had no qualifications, and he just couldn't see patterns and stuff. Even in our group, he'd just sit there happily without saying anything for hours. We tried to ask him a few times if he'd like to chime in or what he was thinking, and he genuinely had nothing going on upstairs. Suddenly, he applied to the sheriff's department and got hired, and they loved him. He's been there for years. That changed my view of the sheriff's department. Story 3. I work in fabrication, and we have a dude who works with us who we rag on a lot about how ineffective he is. We all do it to each other, but he does all the mundane shit. I love my job and everything, but I can't, for the love of God, sit and clean tubes for 8-10 hours a day, and this guy does it with the biggest smile on his face. To him, it's better than doing all the heavier, more complex stuff that we like to do. When I asked him why he loves doing all the menial shit, he told me he did screen printing for about 2 decades and had to do color correction and run a bunch of machines every day for about 10 hours a day. Got tired of the complexity and pressure and looked for a job that he doesn't need to crack his brain over. Story 4. In college, I worked at UPS. I loaded delivery trucks, so you try as best you can to sort the truck based on the driver's route. There wasn't a lot of thought to it, but definitely more than loading, unloading the semi-trucks. A couple of weeks after I started, I had pretty much memorized the order to load my trucks. The guy who had my trucks before me was training to become a driver, and he stopped by one day and asked me how it's going. "Just trying to get this somewhere," I said offhandedly as I had a package in my hand. He took it, walked to the shelf, placed it right where it needed to go, and said, "There you go. Boy, I was doing this while you were in diapers. Heh heh." I remember trying to smile at him while thinking, holy shit, I have to get out of here. I stayed for about 6 more months and kind of grew to like the balance of learning at school and turning my brain off completely at work, probably because it was fairly physical. When I watch how it's made and stuff of factories, I just think of how miserable it must be to be the guy that moves each baseball from one machine to another. But there's a need for people to do that, and there are people that are fit for the task. Story 5. I worked at a factory making luxury mattress tops to be put on the mattresses. After working in construction for 5 years in the hot Oklahoma sun, snow, rain, and even in a few mild tornadoes, working in a mattress factory was the most miserable job I've ever done. I worked 3 months there and it drove me crazy. I would leave work pissed and just annoyed at everything. I'm used to driving 2-3 hours to work, but driving 15 minutes to that factory and driving home from it was just horrible. I couldn't wait to get home. Story 6. I worked at an Ace Hardware for 8 miserable, soul-sucking years. When I first started, there was a manager there. This manager claimed that when he was younger, he was the highest-ranking civilian in the United States military. His story went like this. When he was 18-ish, he lived next to a military base in Georgia. Him and his genius friends got the bright idea to sneak onto the base. Shortly after, his friends turned back. Of course, he got caught, but they were shocked at how far into the base he was able to infiltrate. From then on, they sent him all over the world as a covert agent to exploit the weak points in base security to fix them. Years later, he was working at Walmart, before it was huge, and some guys in suits came into the store. His name came up in some files, and they came to find out what his involvement was. He told his story, and they didn't believe him. He then took them to the office inside the store and hacked into the Pentagon's computer system to prove his identity. About 2 hours after he told me that story, he paged me up to the office because he had too many windows open on the computer and didn't know how to close them. Hacked into the Pentagon? Story 7. They hired a new HR manager at one of my previous jobs a few months before I quit. Now I had no intention of quitting and had been on a career path including training and etc. for over a year and a half to move into the position above mine. The new HR person was interviewing 2 guys for a job, but one of the managers ended up getting promoted into it. Instead of posting 2 management jobs on our internal job site, she placed these 2 guys from outside the company in these positions. She had no idea there were about 3 people, including myself, who were on a path to move into those positions, and I had even applied and interviewed for the position a few months prior. The day I quit, she wrote my final check with the date wrong by 2 months. She also can't spell anyone's names correctly, even with the information sitting in front of her on her computer. Story 8. I swear they are borderline intellectually challenged and illiterate. This is just the US-based reps, not even the Pakistani ones. A lot of them have this monotone, flat affect that leads me to believe not much is going on upstairs. I had an awful experience getting cable transferred, and their stupid reps made it 10x worse by not even understanding or acknowledging my problem. No turning my box off and on again will not solve my problem when the text showed up 3 times and said I had no signal going to my unit. I had a rep schedule an appointment at a certain time and informed her I already took off work 3x and got nowhere, and it would have to be a different time. She gave me a 5 p.m. appointment, but later when I called to confirm, the automated system said it was the time I specifically told her I couldn't do because I can't keep taking off work. Story 9. Most manual, unskilled labor jobs are typically tedious, hard on the body, and exhausting. Rebar installation comes to mind. At a base level, it's just you, hauling steel around and tying it. Jobs like these aren't challenging because of the labor part of it, though. I rather enjoy mindless, tedious work sometimes. What's challenging about stuff like reinforcing steel is that it often attracts individuals who can't get jobs doing anything else. When I was 21, I did it for about 6 months. It was a real crash course in dealing with drug addicts and ex-convicts. Not saying there aren't regular people working at these jobs. I met lots of really great people doing it, but most of the time, my job involved putting up with someone else's personal problems, whether it was their drug addiction or some ex-con's shady attitude. On any given week, we'd have tools go missing, people hassling me for smokes, or someone flipping out about something, coming to work messed up on drugs or reeking like booze. I have a lot of respect for unskilled manual laborers. We all need to make money, and unfortunately, some jobs can only be filled with unskilled laborers. I'm a full-fledged carpenter now who makes good money. I work for myself. But if I worked for anyone else, they wouldn't be paying me my wage to dig a hole or move gravel. That used to be me when I was a teenager during the summers. Now other guys have to do it, and believe me, they're the ones who help raise the skyscrapers the most. I don't look down on them at all. Story 10. Pet stores seem to hire people who are deliberately ill-equipped to educate customers on the needs of their soon-to-be 5-foot-long red-tail catfish, or their hyper-demanding soon-to-be insane African gray parrot. Like many sales positions, they try to upsell, but in this case it causes harm to the animal and ruins the experience of living with an animal. Should they reach a certain metric in stupidity when dishing out the animal? For example, I once worked at a pet store with my biology degree. I was treated poorly, told to do all the dusting, etc., and odd jobs, but whatever. One day, a little primordial dwarf came in with his parents for his birthday. He was dead set on a lizard as a pet, and his parents were going to oblige, as he had less than 5 years, likely, to live. He fell in love with the idea of a veiled chameleon baby, and sure enough, my boss tried to upsell them to a $3,000 setup. I stepped in, saying that chameleons are not a great choice for a starter reptile and are typically more needy than some of the lower maintenance ones like bearded dragons or crested geckos, which are both far more likely to be gentle and not aggressive to a small, sick child. I set them up with a baby bearded dragon, and the parents were thrilled with the cheaper option, as they couldn't work as much as they would like because of the child, and that it would be very gentle with their little dying kid. The kid was so happy that the bearded dragon liked to sit on his shoulder that he hugged me. I was fired later that week for this, and an incident where I whistle-blowed the fish manager for trying to smuggle arapaima, 13-foot carnivorous fish, babies into Canada. Oh, also, they got mad when I bought $8 of gecko food for my 8-year-old neighbor, claiming I was using the discount to resell it. Man, wouldn't that have been a profitable 10 cents? Just an example of the sheer level of dipshittery I had to deal with doing one 4-hour shift a week at a pet store. Story 11. I do security dispatch, and I also have to clean up the guards' reports so that they can be understood by property managers. We do mostly apartments. We get a lot of uneducated people, dropouts, people who get fired from every other job, so they accept $9/HR to walk around bad neighborhoods and kick people out of the pool or tell people to be quiet. The only requirement is to not have felonies and to be able to pass an online test. Security companies will take anyone because the turnover is so extreme. We're just trying to get our posts filled every day. We regularly hire guys just because we're short for the weekend, knowing they won't last very long. A lot of these guys barely have a basic understanding of the language. They don't even have a foundation to sound out a word. There is no common sense. Had a guard call me and say someone was stabbed, asking if he should call an ambulance because it was just in the cheek. I don't mean to sound insulting. I actually feel bad for our guys that try to do good work but are stuck due to being, well, dumb. I go out of my way to help the ones that show they want better. Of course, not all security guards are dumb, and not all are doing it as a last resort. We have some great guys that genuinely enjoy it, or they're looking to become a cop. We also get a handful of former military or police. The vast majority of entry-level security guards I meet, especially in this type of security, patrolling shitty neighborhoods in the middle of the night, aren't the brightest guys I've ever worked with. Story 12. I've worked at a major retail store for a few years. I've come to realize that when it comes down to it, discipline and accountability around here are all about using complicated and professional-sounding ways of saying it's so-and-so's fault. Nothing gets done. Everyone's pissed and you don't know who to trust. Maybe I need to be smart and quit and get away from the toxic environment. But man, most of the stockers and cashiers are awesome people despite the way the supervisors like to play. We're just not being used right. This might just be upper management in general, for places that don't need a mandatory college or high school education to get up the chain. TBH though. I worked at a BK, and those coworkers may not have always been winners, but I only met 2 out of 15 managers I thought knew how to actually manage people. Story 13. The field of emergency medical services, EMS, has some very bright and very dumb people. Relatively speaking, EMS is a new field that dates back to the 50s, but the qualifications to become an EMT have only become more thorough in the last few years. Having said that, the standards before all the learning went online allowed some very dumb and unqualified individuals to become and remain EMTs. The existence of volunteer agencies only compounds this issue, as many agencies would rather have their members take ambulance calls than train their members to a proficient level of competency. While you would expect that someone who has the capability to save someone's life to be well qualified, it is simply not true. Many EMTs are not cut for the job and simply pass the job by getting their patient in the ambulance and driving them to the hospital without considering a differential diagnosis. Story 14. I've never seen a bigger pack of useless do-nothings with the organizational skills of a wooden plank and half the social skills of the same plank. Back in the early 2000s, I was working for a software company that was doing okay, but one of the senior hire fire managers said it's not good enough. We need to motivate people to do more. So he gave every one of the people in his department horrible reviews. He went so far as to hijack the reviews written by managers reporting to him and rewrote all their reviews. So about 120 developers, translators, testers, and managers were impacted. Several complained to HR after it came out that the reviews had been altered. My manager had a short meeting with his reports, I was one of them, and said that the comments were already on file and there wasn't anything he could do, which is true. Once salary review comments are in the system, they can't be altered. However, We could write a rebuttal, which would also go on file and have the same protections. Since my review had been altered with Trump-level lies and distortions, I wrote a rebuttal. I wasn't the only one. As it turned out, more than half the department wrote rebuttals, and most of them disproving this guy's lies with evidence, emails, contracts, design review comments, etc. The board got wind of what was happening and wanted to see the reviews and the rebuttals. This made our senior manager nervous, so he told the head of HR to alter the rebuttals, water down the comments. But you can't. Once they're in the system, they're locked. Nobody can edit them. The HR director told one of her junior people in an email he needed to figure out how to hack the system and alter the comments or he'd be fired. This dude was not stupid and knew what was being asked of him was illegal, and the threat of firing him to perform an illegal act was also illegal. Our offices were very close to the State Labor Board offices, so he called them, printed out the incriminating evidence, met with the SLB officials, went back to his desk, quit his job without explanation. 3 hours later, State Police and SLB showed up at our offices, bodily removed the HR director from her office, sealed it with crime scene tape, and the CEO, after reading the complaint, fired her on the spot. It took months to settle and sort out all the HR-related garbage she'd been pulling for years. Story 15. I got a summer job for a broadband tech support company when I left school before going to university. I actually managed to see out the summer. We got a week of training. I use the word training in its loosest possible sense. The man-child who was training us spent most of his time showing us funny entries on Urban Dictionary. He once brought up a real customer's profile, name, address, telephone number, email, and showed them off to the room because his name was quite funny. Most of the people I was training with genuinely had nothing interesting going on in their lives. One of them at the introduction portion of the first day said that her hobby was driving around and stuff, and 3 of them were fired before the week was out because they just couldn't be arsed turning up on time. It was quite spectacular being only 17, and in my first job realizing that I was probably the most intellectually mature person in the room. The lack of any attempt at professionalism was staggering. Fair enough, it's a minimum wage job, but we kept getting customer complaints about aggressive call handling and swearing on the line, if not from the call handler, then from the banter in the background. We weren't trained, of course, so it was sort of teach yourself on the job. They'd just hang up on calls, they'd deliberately send people to the wrong department, and they'd give ridiculously wrong information. I spent quite a lot of my time trying to fix the mistakes that my coworkers had made when the caller came back on the phone later that day. Of the managers, the people who did take the job seriously were pathetic and very full of their own self-importance. Remember, this is a call center, so these people earn just a few pennies more than the minimum wage. The standard attire was jeans and a t-shirt. There actually was a dress code that went well above this, but frankly nobody cared. There were people there who were quite good. There were people who had to work there and gave it a good shot. There were some techie people who actually knew what they were doing and enjoyed it. There were some people who were trying to work their way up and took the job quite seriously. But these people were vastly outnumbered by imbeciles. I'm someone who takes my job quite seriously, no matter what it is, so I was quickly earmarked as having a future in the contact center industry. I'm still not sure if that was a compliment or an insult.